I'll look for the... All right, we're going to call the November 3rd, Election Day 2020 Scott County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Once again, we are socially distanced. We are at full strength. We've got folks, Commissioner Ulrich and Commissioner Weckman-Brecky are on Zoom. I'm going to wave to you on the digital world. Item number 2, are there any amendments to the agenda? Not seeing any. I don't think there are, right? We're good to go there. Okay, sounds good. Moving on to item number 3, approving the minutes of the October 20th, 2020 County Board meeting. We've had those distributed.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move adoption of the
Second.
minutes.
We have a motion and a second, and once again, all of our votes will be roll call because of the mixed platform. So Deb, welcome back and take it away.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky. Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
So we'll be looking to the screen for moving lips, and if the mute is a little bit of a delay, but we will get through this. Technology is great most of the time. Item number 4, recognition of interested citizens. This is a great time and opportunity for folks to address the board for things that are not on the agenda. And we will give listening ears to folks for up to 5 minutes on a topic of their choice. So I'm looking outside because we have guests. I'm going to look down the corridor, make sure we don't have any late entries. We don't have anyone. Looking at Deb, is there anyone on Zoom? All right. So we will go to item number 5. The consent agenda. These are all items that will pass in one motion that have been vetted through the staff. So I will read through these, and then there will be an opportunity to discuss or pull if that comes up. 5.1, adopt resolution number 2020-181, approving the grant application, and if awarded, accepting the evidence-based training grant in the amount of $84,402. 5.2, resolution number 2020-183, authorizing the Government Center East/Justice Center renovation bid package contract awards for the Government Center campus project. 5.3, adopt resolution number 2020-184, rejecting bids for lawn care and authorizing an agreement with CNC Lawns, Inc. for snow removal and de-icing services. 5.4, adopt resolution number 2020-185, authorizing the purchase of Microsoft Teams compatible phones and equipment from CDW in the amount of up to $265,000 using Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act funding. Can't wait till that's in the rearview mirror. 5.5, adopt resolution number 2020-186, approving an addendum to the master agreement with Northwoods Consulting Partners, Inc. to add additional functionality through a subscription for the Traverse Capture iPhone application and partially using Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act special revenue funds. 5.6, adopt resolution number 2020-189, authorizing entering into a new 5-year grant agreement number 183-884 with the Minnesota Department of Health for the Statewide Health Improvement Program, SHIP. 5.7, adopt resolution number 2020-190, authorizing entering into grant agreement number 184031, excuse me, with the Minnesota Department of Health for case investigation and contact tracing, CICT, and amend the 2020 public health budget. 5.8, adopt resolution number 2020-182, authorizing the granting of easements to the City of Shakopee pursuant to an agreement to facilitate right-of-way needs for the City of Shakopee's Canterbury Commons public infrastructure projects, including for County Project CP 83-24. 5.9, approve the premises permit application for the Waterford Warriors Snowmobile Club. Looks like winter's coming. 5.10, approve the request for a preliminary and final plat of Sioux Valley Estates, Adam Bessie, Jessica Bessie, Andrew Sellner, Sarah Marsnick, applicants and property owners, consisting of 4 lots and 40 acres in Section 11 of New Market Township and conservation easements. 5.11, adopt resolution number 2020-187, approving a minor amendment to the Scott County 2040 Comprehensive Plan for Warren Pfeiffer, applicant, and Diamond W LLC owner, and forwarding amendment to the Metropolitan Council for review. 5.12, adopt resolution number 2020-179, appointing Daniel M. Wormer as Scott County Surveyor effective October 12, 2020 through October 11, 2021, and rescinding resolution number 2019-044. 5.13, adopt resolution number 2020-180, reappointing Michael J. Thompson as Scott County Assessor effective January 1st, 2021 for the 4-year term ending December 31st, 2024, and rescinding resolution number 2016-177. 5.14, approve payroll processing of personnel actions. Those are the 14 items on consent. Are there any, is there any discussion or anyone want anything pulled, or what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want to make one brief comment about the SHIP funding one that is on here at 5 point, wherever it was, you just read it.
Yep.
I just want to again express my thanks to the staff for putting that in the workshop last week and giving us a little more of an overview and assurance that it's grant funded, although there does seem to be a little bit of creep from the state. We pick up 10% of some of the costs and so on, but thanks for doing that, and I'll reluctantly support it.
All right.
I would second that.
Yeah, well, we have a motion. I heard a motion from Commissioner Ulrich on the.
I'll give a second. then
Okay,
for
you
the whole
second to consent
yep,
as read.
as read, yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment you would like to make, or any further discussion in digital land or here in person on the consent agenda? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. All right.
Commissioner Ruckman-Brecky. Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to item 6.1 on the agenda. Approve the request for a conditional use permit to construct and operate a private heliport on a 40-acre parcel in the RR1 and RR1C zoning districts. Douglas Schiffer and applicant, and Douglas and Kelly Schiffer, property owners in Section 26 of Cedar Lake Township. And Marty is here to do the presentation. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you stated, the request before you here today is for a conditional use permit for Doug Schiefer to operate a private heliport on his property in Section 26 of Cedar Lake Township. I'm going to turn on the document camera here, zoom in. So on the screen right now is a site location map of the applicant's property. It is located approximately a half mile south of County Road 2 and about a third of a mile to the east of County Road 23. This cluster of lots to the northwest of the applicant's property is the Hunter's Crest Residential Cluster Subdivision. And these residential lots to the east of the applicant's property and north of the applicant's property are parts of the Wildwood Pond Residential Cluster Subdivisions. The parcels to the south are more large lot residential and agricultural pieces. The applicant's property consists of 40 acres. The northern portion of the applicant's property outlined in red here consists of 25 to 26 acres. This portion of his property is in the Wildwood Pond Residential Cluster Subdivision, and as such it is zoned RR1C, which is Rural Residential Cluster. Heliports are not allowed within the Rural Residential Cluster zoning district. The southern portion of the applicant's property here, outlined in blue, consists of 14 to 15 acres and is outside of the Wildwood Pond Rural Residential Cluster Subdivision. This portion of its property is owned RR1 Rural Residential Reserve. It is in this area that private heliports are allowed as a conditional use permit. While split zonings on parcels such as the applicants, where you have two zoning districts on one piece of property, isn't the norm, it is not uncommon in Scott County either. There are approximately 100 situations similar to this throughout the county, and you did receive a map with your agenda showing where those parcels were located. Go to an aerial photograph here. Again, I'm gonna zoom in a little tighter. Again, of the applicant's property. Outlined in red here is the portion of the property in the Wildwood Pond development. The applicant's home is located here. This is the property that is located within the rural residential portion of the property. The heliport would be located in this north central portion of the property. This is the highest point of the property as the land drops off to the west, south, and east of that location. I think it's important to note that these vacant 5 lots within Wildwood Pond to the north of the applicant's parcel are actually owned by the applicant. He owns those pieces. Also, this parcel here to the west of the heliport parcel is either under control of the applicant or is being purchased by the applicant. Here is a survey of the applicant's property, again identifying the RR1C portion of the property and the RR1 portion of the property here to the south. The heliport would be located approximately in this area here. The heliport will consist of a concrete circular pad approximately 37 feet in diameter. It will have lights on the perimeter of the pad. These lights are embedded into the pad and shine upward so that they're visible when you're in the air. However, if you're on the ground, they are not very visible from surrounding properties. These lights would be controlled by the applicant via his phone, so they would only need to be turned on when there is a flight operation going on, takeoff or landing, and could be turned off when that is concluded. In addition to the helipad, there would be a building constructed to store the helicopter. This particular survey shows that building orientated north-south. The applicant has indicated he would like to orientate that east-west. And then in between the building and the pad, there'd be a concrete drive that would be used to transport the helicopter to and from the helipad. One of the big discussion points with this helipad request are the 3 approach departure paths proposed from the helipad. There is a south approach departure path, which is primarily over agricultural land. There is a west approach departure path, which is primarily over low ground and wetland. And then there is the north approach departure path, which you have received significant comments on here. A number of the residents within the Hunter's Crest subdivision have requested this approach departure path be eliminated. In response to those requests, the applicant did, at the second Planning Commission meeting, provide an alternative north approach departure path. The original path is shown here in green. He showed one that actually veered more off to the east, bringing the north approach departure path further from those residents in the Hunter's Crest development. This was, like I said, presented late.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Marty, if I can ask this while she's doing, so that path, the one that you showed, the original one, would be eliminated, and then the other one would be the new one that would be more of a northeast type of a path?
So, yes, Commissioner Wolf, that's the question. At the Planning Commission meeting, it was not entirely clear when the Planning Commission made their recommendation to this board which north flight path they were recommending. So as part of your recommendation here, if you choose to approve this conditional use permit, I think it's important that we articulate which north approach departure path would be used, whether it was the original north approach departure path here or the modified one that is more to the east.
Original's green, alternate is yellow.
Correct.
And when we were out last week, the yellow was the one that was used?
That's my understanding, Commissioner, yes, it was the yellow that the applicant was following on his approaches to the helipad.
And I just want to look at Deb, our technology is all good? Or are we, to make sure that we're,
I'm still not seeing it on my laptop, but I can see
We're
it.
not able
Oh.
to share from the
got it?
maps,
because I
the
see-
document camera.
I got it.
All right, so we just need to maybe narrate what we're, a little bit more, what's being, I guess as best you can, just, maybe just a little description of what we're looking at.
All right. This request was presented at two planning commission meetings. The first planning commission meeting, September 14th. Planning commission took testimony from adjacent property owners. They received numerous emails, numerous letters, both in support and in opposition of the helipad. There was also two petitions submitted, one in support of the helipad, one against the helipad. All that information was provided to the board as part of your agenda, so you did have access to that. As I said, there was a significant amount of public comment on this request. At the conclusion of that first Planning Commission hearing, the Planning Commission directed the applicant to provide some additional information regarding noise, topography of those different flight paths, emergency action plan, security plan, and lighting plan for the helipad. They also directed staff to revise the draft conditions of approval to take into account the public comment that was received at that meeting. Much of that comment was related to the north flight path, hours of operation, days of operation, those sorts of things. The item came back to the Planning Commission in October 12th. At that meeting, the applicant presented the new information, but the bulk of the meeting was spent going over the draft conditions of approval. There was significant discussion on a number of those conditions. The Planning Commission chair actually polled the commission members for a consensus on a number of the conditions to build consensus on conditions that were brought up by representatives of the neighborhood and the applicant. And what I'd like to do is go over some of those conditions that were discussed at that second Planning Commission based on the recommendation that they made to this board. Now, if I could.
Please do. No, we're still on the document
You'd
camera.
have to get a lot closer. I see it on your picture, that camera.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're getting closer. Go to your left a little bit. Oh, there you go. Yep, there. No, we can't read that, but.
No, so this is all part of the record that is, all of these documents are out on, to get ready for this meeting. So the documents are online and have been submitted out there. If people want to go there and get those,
The conditions are all out there in the RBA document, yes.
we're having a little technology.
Yeah. Right at the start of 6.1 is where all those conditions are
Yes.
online, so.
Yes.
So, I don't know, I can't tell if we've got, we got a, yeah, are we seeing that on our computers? If we can, it'd be nice if that was, I know it's already part of the record, but it would just be nice if there was another way. I'm looking at Deb with, there's a way to pull those up on that computer or not.
If we could take just a couple minute
You know what?
recess.
Let's
I
do that.
can do that.
We are, we're gonna, 9:21, we're gonna take a brief technology recess, and we will be back as soon as we can. All right, it's 9:28 and we are back from a technology recess. All of this was already part of the record, but I think it was important to take those few minutes to try to get these documents on the same screen that everyone can view at the same time while you're kind of illustrating and going through these documents. So I think it was a good thing to do. All right,
So,
take it away, please. Thank you.
all right, what you're viewing right now are the draft conditions recommended to the county board by the planning commission. At the second meeting, they spent a significant amount of time discussing condition 1. Condition 1 deals with an annual certification that the applicant needs to provide to the county planning office. In addition to this annual certification, the planning commission requested that the certification include a log of all flight operations with date, time of each takeoff and landing, the flight path used for each takeoff and landing, and the weather or wind condition for any operation that utilized the north flight path. They felt this was important to track how often that north flight path was used and under what conditions it was used. They also spent a lot of time discussing condition number 2. Condition number 2 is a condition that allows the planning commission to review the conditional use permit. They spent a lot of time debating on whether it should be may review the conditional use permit or shall. They arrived at shall because they felt it was important to review the flight log annually to see how often that north flight path is being used and under what conditions. They also felt it was important to review complaints that might be received on the heliport, and then actions taken to respond to those complaints.
Mr. Chair, is it okay to ask Marty questions while these?
I believe so.
Sure,
I think so.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Marty, on that, the length of the CUP is, I believe, 5 years in our, just a standard CUP, correct?
No, a conditional use permit actually
Goes
runs
with the property.
runs with the property, so irrespective of owner, it runs along with the property. And I'm getting to condition number 6 that lends itself to that comment.
Yeah.
So the planning commission did add a second sentence to condition number 6. If the property is sold, the new owner shall contact the county planning department to review the conditions of the conditional use permit and officially transfer the permit. That language is pretty common on all conditional use permits and interim use permits that we issue. It is the second sentence of that the planning commission felt was important. If a new property owner does not utilize the heliport within 1 year of the date of the sale, the CUP shall expire or essentially terminate upon that time period of non-use of a new owner. Condition number 8 was also a condition that the planning commission spent a lot of time on. This condition limits takeoffs and landings to 2 takeoffs and 2 landings a day and 50 takeoffs and 50 landings annually. The applicant wanted significantly more takeoffs and landings annually than what is allowed in this condition. The planning commission felt that the 50 was appropriate, 50 takeoffs and 50 landings annually. They also were comfortable with the 2 takeoffs and 2 landings per day, feeling that the main controlling point to this condition was the 50 takeoffs and 50 landings annually. Also, they discussed on 4 days per calendar year, the number of takeoffs and landing may exceed 2. They were also okay with keeping this language in the condition, feeling that overall the applicant cannot exceed that 50 takeoffs and 50 landings annually. They did add that last sentence. The applicant shall notify the county prior to the 4 days where the exceedance will occur. And this is so the staff is aware should we get any calls that the helicopter is taking off and landing more than twice in a day. They spent a lot of time discussing condition 9, which deals with hours of operation that the helipad can be used and days that the helipad could be used. There was some talk about only allowing the helipad during daylight hours, from sunup to sundown, a half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset, Planning Commission felt that time can vary significantly from season to season, and actually with the sunrise and sunset can vary day to day. So they felt it would be more appropriate just to set a start and stop time of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., irrespective of the season. They discussed limiting the use of the flight pad on weekends and on Sundays. They discussed that quite heavily. They felt that Sundays could be a day that the applicant would want to use the flight pad because might be coming back from a cabin up north, from visiting family in South Dakota, and he also has a ranch out in Nebraska. So that might be a day that he would wish to use it quite a bit, and they didn't feel it was necessary to restrict the helipad from use on weekends. Condition 10, compliance with NPCA noise rules. This was not discussed real heavily by the Planning Commission, but I think it's important to note the amount of study and research that's gone into the amount of noise that this helicopter makes. Prior to the first Planning Commission meeting, staff provided MPCA with the noise data that the applicant submitted with the application. MPCA emailed back our environmental health department and essentially said the short duration of the helicopter noise would likely not violate the noise standard. In other words, because the helicopter is run for such a short period of time, likely the noise standard would not be violated. Coming out of the first Planning Commission meeting, when the Planning Commission requested that the applicant provide additional noise data, the applicant actually had an acoustician look at the noise data from the helicopter. Their acoustician determined that, provided a report. I can get this to the right spot. Their acoustician provided a report that essentially said the helicopter could take off and land 6 times in an hour and not exceed the Minnesota State noise standard. And it all went back to how long the helicopter exceeded that 65 dB, because Minnesota State noise rules allows exceedance of 65 decibels for 6 minutes in any hour. And that's what this comes down to, is how long would that exceedance occur, and would it be over six minutes in an hour? So their acoustician felt like, no, the helicopter will not exceed Minnesota State noise standard. Even after all that, county staff had Skelly and Loy, which is a division of Terracon companies. Terracon has assisted us with other environmental reviews. We had them look at all the noise data that had accumulated, what was submitted with the permit, what the neighbors had submitted, what the acoustician with the applicant had put together, and put together a report for us. And essentially, they determined that based on typical operating parameters, 2 to 3 minute events, takeoff and landing, theoretically, the heliport could accommodate 1 takeoff and 1 landing per hour while remaining below NPCA L10 noise threshold. So all the experts that have been looking at the noise data on the helicopter are determining that the heliport can operate and not exceed state noise standards. And I thought that was important to point out to the board because so much has been brought up about the noise from the helicopter. Let me get back to the conditions document. We're actually getting to the end of the ones that the Planning Commission spent significant time discussing. Condition number 13, they spent a lot of time on that one. That one relates to the north flight path. To limit the impact on residents' livestock, power lines, the applicant shall only use the FAA recommended approach departure paths from the south and west unless weather or wind conditions would warrant the use of the north flight path. Essentially, all things being equal, relatively calm winds, the applicant can use any flight path, use the south flight path or the west flight path. The north flight path could only be used when weather conditions warrant. The Planning Commission did not want to eliminate that north flight path. They felt it was important when wind conditions, such as the day we were out there for the demonstration, a south wind, 10 to 20 miles an hour, you want to land and take the helicopter off into the wind, it was important to have that north approach departure path, they felt. This is the condition where if we do decide, if this board does decide to recommend approval of this permit, we should articulate which north approach departure path would be used, whether it would be the modified north off to the east or the original north. The last condition that they spent a significant amount of time or some time discussing was condition 15, and this is related to an eagle's nest that's out in the area. There was discussion on whether the applicant would need to maintain 1,000 feet from the eagle's nest during the breeding season as recommended by the Eagle Act, or if they should do that all year long. Due to some confusion of when the eagle breeding season is, they just felt it was appropriate to put the separation to occur all year long. And that would work with the applicant as long as he stays on his flight path, he'll be maintaining that 1,000-foot separation from the eagle's nest. Those were the main points in the condition that the Planning Commission discussed. They did recommend this conditional use permit to the county board on a vote of 7-0 with the 19 conditions that are before you here today. That concludes my presentation. I know the applicant is present and will stand for any questions.
All right, Marty, thank you very much.
So can I, something?
Mr. Chair?
Nope. Go ahead,
Let's go with Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Marty, for the presentation. It's good to have a reminder with our planning commission's discussions. I think most of us did try and follow and watch those discussions. I just want to clarify a couple things. With condition number 1, the public report that's due to the planning and zoning office each January, I assume that will be a public report available to the public.
Yes, so that would be a document that the Planning Commission provides us. Is essentially a letter that states he's in compliance with the permit and provides that log information requested. And yes, that would be a public document.
Great, thanks. And in condition number 2, where the Planning Commission, and I think we see this language frequently, the Planning Commission shall review the CUP each year. Can you just talk for a minute what review means? And you did, to say that they'll look at that report, that type of thing, but what kind of actions are allowed in a review? Can the whole thing be opened up? Can it be changed? Can you just speak to that for a moment?
So in the review, the Planning Commission could review all aspects of the operation. They could look at the flight log, the number of flights taken, which flight path was used, was the north flight path only used during inclement weather, what were the complaints received on the operations, were those complaints legitimate, were they proven out? Did the county provide any, or did we do additional noise study? If we did, what were the results of that study? So that would be what would be reviewed as part of this review. Coming out of the review, the Planning Commission does not have the ability to change the conditions of the permit. I think their ability here would be to remind the applicant to either comply with the conditions or reaffirm that he's complying with the conditions. If they felt things were out of whack enough, they could direct staff to look at possible revocation of the permit, but they would not have the ability to change a condition.
Great, thank you. I just wanted that clarification. And then on number 8, the 4 days where the applicants allowed additional operations, was there any discussion at the Planning Commission about, I didn't see it, but I just am wondering about limiting those days, for example, not being the 4th of July or national holidays or things like that?
No, there was not any discussion along those lines, Commissioner Brecky.
Great, thank you.
And I'm just going to clarify real quick on that point. That's 50 operations.
Correct. 50 takeoffs and 50 landings
Thank
per
you.
year.
Yeah.
And this unlimited day that she's referring to still goes against the 50.
That is correct, Commissioner
So
Beer.
it's not a 50 and, it's a 50, all 50 is all inclusive, and some days they could pile up more than others.
So if they went 10, that counted towards that 50.
correct. That would be
Is that right?
essentially 20% of their takeoffs and landings would have occurred
Okay.
in that one day. Yep.
All right, you had a,
I was just gonna ask, Mr. Chair, so we can mandate primary directions of takeoff and landing then? So the south and the west, we could say, that's what we would like, as the, and the north, northeast, that's what we would prefer you not use because it goes over so many folks?
Yes, Commissioner Wolf, essentially that's what the Planning Commission is saying here.
Okay.
They would prefer the applicant to use the south flight path or the west flight path because it impacts fewer homes. However, they were not ready to remove totally that north flight path. They felt it was important to keep in there for those days when weather conditions for safe operation of the helicopter would be necessary. So, like I said, if there was no wind on a particular day, the applicant would not need to utilize the north flight path. He could use one of the other ones for approaches and departures.
And how would we monitor that then?
That would be monitored a couple ways. One, through the log that the applicant will be maintaining for us. The other thing is there's some websites out there, Flight Tracker, where you can actually go and monitor which if the helicopter flew or not. I don't know if you'd be able to determine flight path. But essentially the log would be our main way of monitoring that and contacting the applicant if we got questions.
and at some point, I'm gonna look down the right for our county attorney to remind us what our role is, just for clarification, but on this particular note with the flight paths, our role as the county is to help with the land use. Nothing to do with the airspace. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, Commissioner Vera, I think that is a fair assessment because what we allow is a private heliport as part of our land use permit. Once the helicopter gets into the air, it's difficult to regulate how somebody flies. That's the role of the FAA, MnDOT Aeronautics.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And did you have a question before we went?
I got a couple, if I may. On item number 11, and this is part of what I do when I'm not here.
And, is there a way, Marty, could you pull up that,
Yeah, pull up the flight path thing, if you would.
yeah, whatever is most relevant, the conditions or the flight path, or
That's just the one.
That's the one.
that's the north?
Yeah, you had one that had
Scroll-
three.
Scroll
on
up
there.
or whatever, yeah.
No, I deal with small airports quite a bit, not so much heliports. So I called MnDOT Aeronautics just a few minutes ago and I said, do you issue licenses? Because they don't issue a license for a private use airstrip like on someone's farm, used only by the owner of the dirt. There's no license involved, unless it's 5 miles from a public use airport. So I checked, this one is between 8 and 10 miles. My measuring stick isn't that precise, from Air Lake. So it doesn't fall within the purview. So I said, if we require this guy to get a license from MnDOT, will you issue him one? And she said, I don't think so, but he's welcome to apply. So condition number 11 might be a difficult one. I mean, he can apply, and if that's what we mean by number 11, we shall apply for a license from MnDOT and approval to license to operate. He can meet that, but whether or not MnDOT's going to issue a license for someone that owns their own helipad and operates with only their own machinery, I'm not sure that that could happen, and they were going to do some more research and get back to us. I'm sorry I didn't catch this at the Planning Commission because I would have raised it, had a commissioner raise it there. As soon as he opens it up for others to come, like if I would bring my helicopter, not that I'd be caught flying a helicopter because I like my wings bolted to the fuselage so I can keep an eye on them. But people fly helicopters. As soon as he has friends come in, then he requires a license. But if it's private use for the landowner's use only, I'm not sure we're going to be able to comply with that. I just want to raise that question. Did it come up at planning or did anybody else ask it?
It did not come up at planning. However, back in July, the applicant did have the MnDOT Aeronautics out at the site to look at it to determine would it likely meet their licensing requirements, and they said yes, it would. In my discussion with Rick Bronig, MnDOT was prepared to issue a license here. They were waiting on, one thing would be this board to approve the conditional use permit before they would move ahead to issue any license, however. So no license, I believe, has been issued at this point, though.
Okay, good. If Rick said it, then they might, it's possible they might issue it. There's no harm in issuing one. It's just that it's
Right.
not required unless. Now, this is, I see your windrows up here in the corner. And just 8 miles away at Air Lake, the windrows is predominantly northwest and southeast. And then that's why I'm wondering why there was no easterly departure put in here. I see the westerly, it looks like dominant wind from the west and south. When the wind blows hard, that's where it usually blows from on those days. But southeast, apparently they think, the pilot thinks the south departure can handle the southeast wind. Were there any comments that he made about that at the Planning Commission?
The applicant did not request an east approach departure path. I
Okay.
think a couple of the issues with an east approach departure path is a tree line that exists along Wildwood Drive here. If
yeah.
you remember when we were out there, there was a tree
Yes.
line there. Some of
Yes.
those trees may need to be removed to accommodate that. Also, the proximity to the homes in Wildwood
Okay.
are closer to the helipad than other directions. So he felt that he didn't need to have an east approach departure path.
So these are the ones that the pilot thought would accommodate his needs?
Correct.
Okay, that's good for us to hear on the record. The last comment I'll make is number 8, 50 a year. That's less than one takeoff and one landing a week. Is that, how did that get arrived, and what did the applicant have to say about that? And then I have a follow-on question, perhaps.
Well, the initial draft conditions that were submitted to the Planning Commission in September included 84 takeoffs and landings per year. That's what the applicant felt
84,
would
okay.
work for there. However, in a document that the applicant did send out to neighboring property owners, he indicated he likely would not exceed 50 takeoffs and landings per year.
Okay.
So that comment seemed to take hold with Planning Commission members, with neighbors, and that's why it came into the conditional use permit. The applicant clearly would like to have a greater number of takeoffs and landings per year. At this point, he seems willing to accept the 50, however, that are in the permit.
And I want to clarify on that, because I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but the 84 takeoffs and landings, 84 takeoffs and landings or 84 operations? And then 50, I just want to make sure that I'm keeping it straight because, so the original 84 was operations or 84 cumulative takeoff and landings?
It was 84 takeoffs and 84 landings
All right.
in a year.
Yep.
So keeping apples to apples here.
Yep.
If you're doing it right, your takeoffs and landings always equal each other.
Yes.
And I'm glad you clarified that, because in FAA parlance, an operation is a takeoff. A landing is a separate operation, so this would be 50, it'd be 100 operations in
100
FAA,
is the
but
real
it's 50
number.
takeoffs, 50 landings. Okay, I don't know the applicant, I don't know what he's doing with his helicopter, maybe it's just a nice place to come in and if it's a late night, instead of going to an airport and driving home, it's his business, and it's obviously a conditional use in this area. But if he's okay with 50, I guess I'll be okay with 50, but to me, it seems like an unreasonably low number. And that's why I raised the point. Follow-on question, playing what-if games. Suppose a couple years from now, everybody realizes that, wow, this really is not a big deal after all. Could the applicant come back and alter the 50? Could that be amended? And what would be the process for that, should that happen?
Yes, Commissioner Beard, that is the process that would happen if the applicant decided a couple of years down the road where, people are understanding how he's flying now, it's not creating major impacts to the neighborhood. I'd like to come back and request additional flight operations. Then he could request to amend the conditional use permit, which would follow the same process as issuing the conditional use permit. Would move through the Planning Commission and then to this board for approval.
Okay. Well, I guess that's all I have to say, Mr. Chair. If it's worked its way through the process and the applicant is gonna live with 50, and the board thought it was all right, I'm good with this.
Except let me take an opposing view. If
Sure.
you're a neighbor, 50 is 50 too many, right? I mean, we've got some of those emails and phone calls. So
Yeah, a bunch of
I'm
them,
just-
yes, I have.
I'm just throwing that out there it's like takeoffs and landings, there's some of each, so anyhow. Okay,
So I'm gonna look to the screen. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky or Commissioner Ulrich, is there anything further?
Sure, I guess I would like a little more discussion on the north route. I understand, and I heard Marty and I think materials support it, saying that, the south and west routes are the preliminary, or the primary routes. North route only to be used if wind and weather conditions warrant. I'm not an expert in winds and flying and all this. Is that a common occurrence? You know, can we talk about how common that could be, that winds and weather conditions would warrant the need to use that north route?
And I too have that as a note, and, you know, so we are gonna talk about that, because that's sort of falls into the new information camp, so I have that one written down as well, because that's a question. Commissioner Ulrich, do you have anything specific on this at this point?
No, I don't have any questions, thank you.
So, I think now I'm gonna look to our county attorney. I mean, we're gonna still look at some new information with this north route, but maybe now is a good time to give us a reminder, just for the public, what our role is, the county board is, as it relates to this particular item number.
Certainly, I will mention one thing, as long as it was just brought up about the northern route, and I think the board needs to be careful about putting yourself in the seat of the pilot operating an aircraft and telling that pilot what should be safe or not safe regarding how that operation should take place. So I would just put that caveat out there, that you don't want to take away what may be a safer route for someone that could be flying an aircraft. As far as the commissioner's role here today, you're kind of stepping outside your normal role. Normally, you set policies, procedures, goals, how you want the county to run, and you direct your staff county staff to go out and implement those goals and policies. Today, you're acting as a quasi-judicial role. You're acting as a judge or you're a jury. You don't have a dog in the fight. You look at the facts. You apply the law, in this case, Minnesota statute, ordinances that the county has in place right now. You apply those facts to those conditions. You're the referee. You're the judge. You may not like where they lead you. You may like where they lead you. That's irrelevant. You apply the facts to the law and you make your decision based on that. So you're acting as a quasi-judicial role, as a judge or a jury, not necessarily as your policymakers right now. If you want something changed in the future, that's for a later date, not for today. Any questions on that?
Online, I'm assuming you guys heard that pretty well there.
Coming back, I do have one question, not related to Ron, but I do see the map here. I was unable to find it in the 400 pages of documents that we had before us quickly. I couldn't find it. So I understand that when we were out for a test, it was the yellow route that was tested, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on that. But it would seem to me that that if that was what was presented and that's what we all heard and all saw and were tested on, that should be the proposal. In other words, I would think it would be a mistake to approve the green that we didn't see. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of those points about what we saw and heard. Is that correct, that we saw the yellow flight plan demonstrated?
That is correct, Commissioner Ulrich. When the applicant flew the north flight path, he was flying the modified north flight path, which would be the yellow path that is on the screen. So yes, that is what you experienced when you were out there.
So that is one item. Ron, thanks for, you know, kind of giving everyone, I just want to put that out, a reminder for all of us and the public as well, that we're trying to balance the law. We've got the law and property rights on both sides of the fence. That's a two-way, that cuts both ways. So at this point, I think we should maybe open it up to any new information, and chief among them is this green and yellow, because that still seems to be the open item. And I'm looking to the gentleman in front of me, because I think there's been some eye contact. I'm assuming you're, or whoever's gonna represent the applicant. Because in no way, I don't think in any way the board wants to dictate, hey, you should take off this way. That's not the question. The question is, of the applicants choosing between the green and the yellow, which one is it, and assuming that safety falls on the pilot, because I am not a pilot. So whoever wants to address that from the applicant perspective, we've got room if anyone needs to come in this room. We're all trying to keep the social distance thing going.
One or two people talk, or?
Well, I guess on this issue, as many as we need to make sure we got it clarified.
Okay.
And again, we're trying to, you know, it's been through the process, we're trying to open this up to new information. So maybe just introduce yourself so we know who you are, and any facts you can shed on the green or the yellow would be great.
All right, well, good morning, Commissioners, and thank you all for your time on this. And I really appreciate you guys coming out and listening to the sample test flight as well. Your time is important, I appreciate that. I think you guys have already said it, the north approach departure path, it's a safety issue. We've been through that. As far as...
Can I interrupt you just for a second? Just introduce yourself so we know who you're...
I'm sorry, I'm Doug Schieffer, I'm the applicant.
Got it.
Okay, all right.
And behind me here is Rex Alexander, he's a heliport expert.
Okay.
So maybe you want to just strictly ask him the road you guys are going down. I mean, I was prepared to talk about, you know, obviously I was going to come in and fight for that north approach departure path only on safety requires it. I don't want to be intrusive to anybody. I'm going to use those other flight approach departure paths whenever I can. But there are going to be times when safety demands that I use that north approach departure path. Under those circumstances, I assure you I'm going to use it. I'm going to do it safe. But
Is
I
it the
won't
green
unless
or
I
the
have to.
yellow? Does it, like, are you saying that the
So-
yellow is the preferred, or it could be both, or what? I guess that's the open item.
Well, obviously I'd love both, but I have been trying to work with the neighbors to the north, so we moved it and modified. Rex can speak to this, but we modified it 90 degrees to get as far away from those neighbors as possible. And I would like to point out that every aircraft in the entire world can fly 500 feet from their homes under FAA regs, okay? That yellow flight path, it seems to me, the Dolmeyers, which is out of that neighborhood, that Hunter's Lane, that would be the closest home in that neighborhood. That's 1,250 feet away, okay? More than double of what the FAA would require. I don't know, I mean, it's over 4 football fields away, that yellow. I don't have a problem doing the yellow, okay? I wanna do what's least intrusive, but yet safe for me, and I think the yellow can accommodate that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question related to this. Mr. Schieffer, is that how I say it?
Schieffer, yeah.
Schieffer. The day we were out there, the wind was strong from the south.
Correct.
Tell me about your crosswind component. I know when I'm flying my airplane, I'm good to about 17 or 18 knots straight across the runway, and then I've got to find another runway or leave it parked. And the most critical part of a big crosswind landing, of course, is the last couple hundred feet above the ground, when you're kind of determined whether you've got the rudder authority and all that. I've never flown a helicopter. What's your crosswind component there? I understand approaching from the north into the wind on a day when the wind is big from the south. And on the windrows map we had up a little bit ago, the wind doesn't blow hard from the south all that often. Mostly it's northwest or westerly here.
Sure.
Which means you'd be coming from the east, I would think, or maybe the southeast. But talk to me about that day and why from the northwest or from the northeast into the wind. And oh, by the way, your takeoff wouldn't be with a tailwind. You'd be taking off into the wind also, wouldn't you?
Correct.
So if you landed that
taking
way,
off with a
you'd be
headwind.
taking off to the south.
Correct.
Okay, that's important to remember. But talk to me about the crosswind component and what would trigger having to use the yellow path.
Okay. So the day that I flew in there, we were talking 15 gusting 20. okay? And I was at a 200. So when I came, that's why I kept using the north approach departure path to come in. And then when I would exit the south approach departure path, that's perfect, okay, as far as the wind that day. When I had to utilize the west approach departure path, that was a, you know, call it a 15, 17 knot left crosswind, okay, for takeoff purposes. Now, you know, I don't know how much into the weeds you want to get, but to answer your question, if I wouldn't have been real comfortable doing it that day if I was fully loaded, full fuel, family, dogs, luggage. If I was full weight, could it be done? Yes, no problem. That helicopter has a lot of power.
Could what be done? A crosswind?
Could I have
landing?
used that west approach departure path for takeoff? Because
Okay.
that west approach departure path isn't just straight west, it's a little northwest, okay? So theoretically with wind out of 200, I pretty much had a straight left crosswind at that point, okay? You know, there was just two of us in the aircraft. It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't, I would say coming in for landing is more important to keep your head, you know, to keep your head into the wind, so to speak. And, you know, I mean, you're exactly right. That last couple 100 feet is very important. Well, the beauty of a helicopter is you can crab. So you can start turning and crabbing into the wind and land however you need to, those last couple 100 feet. But due to settling with power and those types of things, it's very important that that nose is into the wind coming in on approach.
Okay.
I would say more so than takeoff for sure. And Rex can get into the weeds on that if you would like.
That helps me understand. I can relate to what you're talking about there. And yeah,
Right,
Okay,
I have the
that
beauty to
helps.
crab into the
Yeah.
wind no matter what that last couple 100 feet.
so you don't have to drop. a
Unless
wing
I was
either.
coming from the east or northeast, then but from those other three approach departure paths, I should never have a problem keeping my nose into the wind those last couple 100 feet.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, yep. Anything else online? Any questions there? On that north route? Otherwise, I'm gonna ask again if there's anything new, any new information that needs to be presented at this point in the game that has not already been through the process. I'm looking outside
Can I
and.
possibly talk about the quantity of flights?
I'm gonna look at Marty.
That nail's kind of been pounded already, but
Okay.
You wanna make it less?
No, absolutely not. No, this is currently the most restricted heliport in the United States on my 72 contiguous acres in Scott County, rural Scott County. The most restricted heliport in the United States.
that's why I asked.
Right.
But again, we could look at this in,
Yeah, you've heard the process. My advice would be that we adopt what's here, and if the wings don't fall off, figure speech.
Right, yeah, right.
Maybe in a year you come back and ask for an amendment. That would
Understand.
be the process.
Understand. Okay.
Yeah, this is the balancing of everyone's property rights. You've got property rights, we get that.
Yep.
And I think there's neighbors out, well, certainly we've talked, they have property rights, and there's the law, as our county attorney reminded us. So this is everyone's attempt to try to get there.
Okay. Understand.
So looking at Marty, do we need anything more specific on the green or the yellow? Or
Thank you, Commissioners.
Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. My name is Rex Alexander. I represent the applicant in his heliport design. That's what I do for a living, and I've been in helicopters for over 40 years, flying and designing heliports. One thing I would caution the commission on in looking at the airspace piece is these are recommendations. We still have to run these through both the Department of Transportation and the FAA. They have the final say on whether this is applicable. Now, I've run this through the system already myself to both the FAA and the DOT, but there is always that possibility they may come in and say something different, One thing I would say that you might want to keep in the back of your mind is there's another application here that they have used in the past at many private heliports. And what they may do is sector the approach departure path. And what that means would be from that south approach departure path all the way to that north approach departure path. If it's clear, they're going to say, hey, that applicant can shoot an approach and departure within any part of that airspace, not along that route. Now, the federal regulation, Part 91.3, gives the pilot in command the authority to do whatever he deems necessary to meet the safety and criteria of that particular operation. So he is the final authority for any operation for federal regulations. But I assume that we'll be given a blessing from both the FAA and the DOT on what we've presented to them once we do present that in full, and we'll get that information back. One of the reasons we went with the yellow and the green was to offset primarily for distance and noise. Both are equal as far as safety and as far as meeting standard.
Can I ask a technical question to Mr. Alexander?
I figured you would love that.
Yeah, only because I'm curious and not because I'm,
Sure.
but you know, when I'm fixed on final approach, I'm on a mile final
Right.
on my airplane. And I can kind of set things up over that. I don't want to come in from this angle or that angle and try to straighten it out as I'm coming over the numbers on a runway. In a helicopter, I think one of the things I hear about them is they're much more flexible. So when we have a big wind, say from 240 that day, can you still fly the approach from the north and do your adjustment for your approach into the wind once he's over his own property and within 100 feet of the ground or so? Or do you need to be established in some sort of a glide path well before that? You follow my question?
No, understand. And it goes to the airspeed.
Okay.
So as the aircraft descends, it's also decelerating throughout. At one point, the aircraft gets to what's called effective transitional lift. Once it goes through that airspeed, which is approximately 17 knots, then the tail rotor is creating the directional control. Prior to that, it's the vertical fin that's allowing you to provide directional control. So when we get into the different wind conditions, that's the area that we pay the closest attention to. Now, as a pilot, you have the option to adjust the heading of the aircraft into the wind if possible. Now, you'd asked a little bit earlier about the crosswind component. So in a helicopter compared to an airplane, we're actually required when we certify a helicopter under FAA Part 23 to demonstrate crosswind components 17 knots and 360 degrees. So that's what the standard is for certification, and Bell 206 has been demonstrated to meet that. I've got about 3,000 hours in the 206 in several different versions. With that being said, the pilot then has the option to do a go-around. If he deems that he is not in a parameters and it's not a, quote, stabilized approach, the FAA expects him to abort that approach and come in from a different direction. And that, it's an option.
Okay. That helps me understand what's going on in the approach end. So 17 knots and you're going to be pretty close to the ground, so you can shoot the approach into the wind and make the final adjustments there.
Right.
Just, oh, by the way, it seems like gust factor would be pretty important then if you're in a transition zone there. But again, that has nothing to do with this discussion, so probably we can talk offline. I'm sure.
Yeah, when
More
when
than
asked
happy
about-
to have that conversation.
Well, that's what when you asked about getting in the weeds, I knew who was,
No, I live in that space, so no problem.
Mr. Chairman, I'm done asking weed type questions.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
all right. We've asked the question of anything new twice, looking out the window again. Otherwise, Marty, is there anything different as we sit here now?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the only thing that, from staff standpoint, we would like articulated, because we know this is going to be scrutinized very closely. The applicant is going to be monitored by neighbors very closely here. We want to make sure that on this north flight approach departure path, which approach departure path we are expecting him to utilize, whether that is the yellow line here, which is the modified, or the green line, which was the original, or could he potentially use both north approach departure paths?
Remind me what number that's spelled out in again here.
I believe it's spelled out in,
It's 13.
And Mr. Chairman, some
13,
of that,
correct.
and some of that could change a little bit depending on the wind. Right?
Well, not being a helicopter pilot, but I'm thinking that's accurate, Commissioner Wolf, is if the wind is a little bit more from the southwest, you may want to utilize that modified approach to be more head into it. Or if it's more out of the south, directly out of the south, maybe you'd want to use the original green approach departure path.
Because that's the one thing, Mr. Chair, that we heard of many times from the neighbors. If we do this, please take out that north path, right? I mean, in caps. So, that's where I would be at if this were to go forward.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, one thing that may help is to add number 13, after warrant the use of the northerly flight path would be an amendment, comma, consistent with flight operation safety. Because the attorney is exactly right. At the end of it, once it leaves the ground, the FAA says the pilot in command is in charge. In fact,
They're in charge.
they're in charge of the whole operation from the time they walk out and touch the airplane till it goes to your landing and have it tied down. But maybe that would express the intent of the conditional use, that you don't use the northerly flight unless it's absolutely necessary for flight safety. Now, we're doing committee work right here as a commission, but is that something we could do at this point without wrecking this whole thing?
Yes, you can make a motion to amend one of the conditions and include that language and take a vote on that amendment and then vote on
And then vote
the
on the amendment
CUP
if it
as a
should
whole.
prevail. Mr. Chair, I'm inclined to make that motion, but before we do, Marty, does this undo anything else that's been carefully crafted if we would amend number 13 to express our intent that it's a northerly flight path? And I'm going to just, if I was making this application and I wanted to, recognizing that if it passes, you've got a whole year of neighbors keeping very close tabs on everything you're doing with your helicopter, I would probably want to fly the yellow approach on days the wind was big from the south. Or if the big wind was big from the south, maybe leave it at Air Lake or something, or Faribault, wherever he's keeping it, I can't remember, and not fly in on those days. And so I think the one that does the least impact to Hunter's Lane is going to be the one that I would fly if it was me. And so I think it's kind of naturally reinforcing just by having the other conditions, logging the noise and listening to the complaints and so on. So I don't know if we have to pick, but if we talk about the northerly route and make it consistent with operational flight safety or flight operation safety or something like that, it expresses our intent that if he has to make an approach and landing on a day like that, we're going to trust the discretion of the pilot to do it as safely as possible.
And Marty, can you pull that, the 19 up, just so we've got, I know we've got the north path, just as we're talking about different items.
You want to see all three of them again?
No, well, I was gonna go to the conditions.
Oh, not making condition.
Yeah, just because people are referencing different conditions, I just thought for people online might just be easier to kind of. Because again, ultimately, we are deciding land use.
We are.
So the condition that we are discussing right now is condition 13.
Kind of simmering, okay, and Mr. Chairman, I'll just make the motion, and if it gets a second, we can move it. That we amend number 13 to add under the words north on the third line, northerly flight path, comma, consistent with flight safety.
Which would then give the option of the yellow and the green, based on safety. Safety dictates
Safety.
that.
Based on operational flight safety. Operational flight safety, 3 words, period. That'll be my motion to amend.
Comment on that motion, I guess we have to have a second first. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
If I could.
Yes, yep, go ahead.
Okay. It seems to me we just heard the expert, say that the green and the yellow were equally safe, I thought, he said that, and that, so I'm still expressing the idea that what was presented to us, what was presented to the neighbors, which we flew, was the yellow flight path. And I think Marty's asking us to define what is the northern flight path. And I think we should say it's the yellow flight path, because everybody, pilot and expert, have said the yellow is safe, so.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, hearing Commissioner Ulrich, let's make it the northerly flight path, comma, indicated in yellow.
That's more northeast, yeah.
Yeah, it's still northerly, but it's indicated by the yellow line. How do we put that in the conditional use?
I think if you indicated that the northerly flight path would be the yellow path as indicated, as the easterly
Northeasterly.
the northerly flight path more to the east is the one that the applicant will follow. I think everybody will understand what that
Northeasterly
means
flight path.
in interpretation.
And so I don't wanna add more canned, worms to the can.
Sure you do.
Well, but ultimately, we're deciding land use, and Marty, maybe you can corroborate what, the applicant and his, consultant, ultimately, that may change anyway, based on what the FAA or MnDOT says. Is that, we're trying to do the best we can to here, but ultimately, the FAA might say no, the green or whatever, or both, or, so I just want to be, I heard it from them, I just want to make sure we're hearing, and I have no reason to believe that that's not the case. I thought maybe now's the time to talk about that we can try to, yeah, look, I want to see neighbors live together as best they can, and that's not happening as much as we would like here, but trying to balance both people's property rights as well. So if we have that in, that's our intent, but ultimately FAA and wind is going to dictate that.
Yeah, and from staff's perspective, we're moving forward here anticipating, based on the experts and what they're telling us, FAA will likely approve the requested flight paths that are being shown here today. Certainly if they would say you can't use any of them, that would be very problematic, or if they would restrict one or the other, that would be problematic. Would it preclude the heliport from able to be used? Probably not.
Yeah, I want to be careful, like as has been mentioned before, that land use, yep, not a pilot, that safety dictates, and I think that as in, safety dictates everything when you're leaving the ground.
Mr. Chair, would it bring more comfort if we called it the northeasterly flight plan instead of the northerly flight path? Would that, or do you just want to call it the yellow line on the map? We could do it that way too, I suppose.
Commissioner
I would
Goode and
say
Commissioners, I would
northeast.
suggest us calling it the northeasterly flight path.
I would say,
Yeah.
I would,
Then I'll alter my amendment to say the northeasterly flight path. Commissioner Ulrich okay with that? Is a seconder?
I'm okay with that as my second,
And
yeah.
let the record reflect that we mean the yellow line on the map, so I don't know if we put that in the motion.
So were you gonna add anything? Is it Rex?
No, the one thing that I would recommend, this is what I recommend to all municipalities when going down this road, and this is probably the 100th plus that I've done this, is you could say that contingent upon a favorable airspace study from the FAA. That's their airspace study that they then give the client, which then says that that has been deemed appropriate.
Okay.
about, we're making a land use decision, and I hear what the county attorney is saying, but we didn't just come up with these conditions about flight plan. That's been vetted by the planning commission. Where the helicopter takes off and lands, it does impact neighboring land use. So
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that I was said that I think it's okay that we, comment on and put conditions on the flight path as long as we're not taking away the use of and being able to do this, because this isn't allowed use under our ordinance with a conditional use plan. So, I think just because it's happening in the air, I mean, it starts and ends on the land, so it's appropriate in my eyes.
So that would support you, I don't know if we need to do another motion to get the wording that you were talking about for the yellow, or just amend that motion?
Well, that's why I said northeasterly flight path, and we understand that that means the yellow line. It's not north, it's northeasterly.
Marty's giving us a nod of recognition.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would just recommend that Ms. Brazel, read word for word exactly what 13 is going to be, and to ultimately say.
Good idea, yeah.
Vote on that, whether that's acceptable to the board, and proceed after that.
So do you have a bit of a draft there, Deb? Let's just give it a because I see someone else wants to approach, so let's,
This is still under discussion on the motion to amend.
To limit the impact on residences, livestock, and power lines, the applicant shall only use the FAA recommended approach departure paths from the south and west unless weather and wind conditions warrant use of the northeasterly flight path, comma, consistent
Safety.
with flight operational safety.
Yes.
Can I just ask, well, and I forget, Rex, how many times of the 50 do you think that the north and east would be used? 'Cause wind is normally coming from the south and west, and I don't know if you fly these things in the winter or whatever, but how often do you think?
Good question. Marty, can you help me find that wind rose that we had up here? One of the things we looked at,
I mean, I saw those things, but it's like,
Right.
what would be the percent?
percentages,
Eight?
that's a challenge. Having
Yeah.
been a pilot from a good portion of my life, what you've been told that morning and you show up is completely different. So in the wind rose, we look at, this is based on, and I wish I had a little bit bigger one, but you can see the longer axis of the green and the different colors of green are the predominant percentages from that particular direction. So there is a predominant wind out of the south at about 15% of the time. And then out of the west, northwest, or northwest area, you get the majority of your wind. Now, how many days out of the year? That's a 10-year average. Some years are more, some years are less. Things like La Nina play a big challenge in what this is. The other thing that can change this that you have to keep in the back of your mind is that wind information is from an airport farther away. So what the wind is here is influenced significantly by the contours of the land. So the wind may be out of the west at that airport. What it is at the actual landing site can be 90 to 180 degrees different. So I wish I had a crystal ball. I'd tell you exactly how many days that was.
Tell you what, if you had one, we'd wrestle you to the ground, let me tell you.
And Rex, I think it's helpful to point out that on the majority of the days, the wind is less than 10 miles an hour from
Correct.
any direction.
Yeah.
Which means pilot gets to pick his approach and probably has an approach that's favored because it impacts fewer people. Just, by the way.
I would agree with that 100%.
All right, come on up.
There was one, yeah.
So
Good
Steve
morning.
Domeyer, Steve Domeyer. So I just wanted to point out that completely agree that I think that the board, you're not telling him that he has to fly in a certain direction. That's his choice or his choice to make that direction. You can still remove the northern flight path, and if the northern flight route does not, if he has to fly in from the north, there are other airports in the area. You're not telling him he has to fly into his heliport. There are other options. He can continue to fly into Faribault on those days. So I don't think just want to point that out. You don't have to direct him to tell him he has to fly into an area. He has other airports in the area he can choose to fly into or out of if he needs to.
But if the helicopter is on the property in Cedar Lake Township, he can't say, I want to fly out of Faribault or wherever else. He'd have to fly up from that spot.
And if there's a thunderstorm that day, he probably couldn't fly out either. So there are situations where he couldn't fly, right? I mean,
Yep.
Kobe Bryant shouldn't have flown that day, right? I
That's-
mean, so there are situations where he will not be able to fly.
Yeah. Got it.
I think I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's a big wind from the south, he'd be taken off to the south. It's only if there's a big wind from the north with.
And
or
normally it's from the
northeast.
south and the west. And I don't live that far away, but that's where the wind comes. There's a lot of north wind in the winter, but
No, well, and I would agree that there
9,
are
10
days
months.
that he won't be able to fly.
yeah, 9, 10
That's-
months out of the year.
But at the same
South
time,
and
one of the things we want to do for risk mitigation and safety is to provide as many options as possible that he can keep the risk to the absolute lowest degree.
Yeah, again, I'm not an aviator, except when I wear those sunglasses, but I can't, I mean, looking at the people in the room here, you mentioned something about dogs and luggage and wife and kids. I can't imagine that anyone's gonna put themselves in harm's way. You're flying over rooftops. I can't imagine that someone is gonna put themselves in that kind of harm's way. You can't fly, you can't fly. That's a big risk.
Aviators right here.
So,
Well, that's the motion.
Mr. Chairman,
to
you
amend.
have an amendment there to that condition, so you really should actually have a motion and a second. You're gonna have to vote on that condition now individually.
so Deb, read us, just so we're all clear, on this is a motion and a second to amend item number, was it 13? I lost the screen.
And did you want me to read it one more time?
Yeah, I think so. Please.
To limit the impact on residences, livestock, and power lines, the applicant shall only use the FAA recommended approach departure paths from the south and west unless weather and the wind conditions warrant use of the northeasterly flight path, consistent with flight operational safety.
We have a motion. We have a second on an amendment. We've had discussion, but I'm gonna say it one more time.
I'm fully informed and ready to vote on the amendment.
Looking to my left. I'm looking at my screen for our commissioners that are online. Is there any further discussion on this amended item number 13? Otherwise, I'm gonna look to Deb for a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky. Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
Okay, so we have a new amended item number 13 for the conditional use permit. So now we vote for that with the amended item.
Like on the whole CUP,
The whole CUP with the amended 13.
I have a recommendation for the board prior to you doing that.
Okay?
If you look at condition number 1, you can see the last line of that says, for any operation when the north flight path was used, a commissioner may want to,
Can you put that on there?
Sorry.
Deb or Marty?
commissioner may want to
Catch.
make a motion to amend condition number 1 to reflect identical language to condition number 13.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion that we amend number 1 so that the word north in the fourth line says northeasterly flight path. Make it consistent with what we just did on number 13. Thank you, Ron.
Second.
All right, so let's just, we probably should doubly read that.
The applicant is to file with the Scott County Planning Office in January of each year a letter stating that they are in compliance with the conditions of the conditional use permit as issued. The letter shall include a log of all flight operations with the date and time of each takeoff and landing, the flight path used for each takeoff and landing, and the weather and wind conditions for any operation where the northeasterly flight path was used.
Agreed.
So that's an amendment to item number, or condition number 1.
It amounts to a housekeeping.
Right, yep,
Mr. Chairman.
yep. So did you make a motion on that?
There was.
And did Commissioner Ulrich make a second? Did I hear that? Just want to double check. Otherwise, any further discussion on that amendment to item number 1? Otherwise, Deb, take it away, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, I'm looking back down to my right. Is there- With those 2 items amended to reflect to one another, is there anything else before we look at the conditional use permit with those items changed?
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion on 6.1 when you're ready to accept it.
Okay. That was a motion, I'm ready, it's on the table.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the request for a conditional use permit to construct and operate a private heliport on a 40-acre parcel in the RR1 and RR1C zoning districts. Parent, Douglas Schieffer, applicant, and Douglas and Kelly Schieffer, property owners, parent, in section 26 of Cedar Lake Township. If it gets a second, I'll move it, or I'll urge its adoption.
So we have a motion,
Mr. Chair, I'll offer the second, Mr. Chair.
and we have a second on the conditional use permit with items number 1 and 13 amended.
Thank you. I should have added as amended, the approval of the request as amended. Thank you.
Is there any issue with that? We've got a motion and a second for the conditional use permit as amended. Is there any further discussion? Looking at my screen, to my left and to my right, I'm coming back to my
I
left.
would just, Mr. Chair, just say, yeah, I will reluctantly support this. You know, I've kind of lived through this thing for well over a year here. There was some flying and stuff going around, then we found out about it. I found out about it at a township meeting, or so, maybe Marty called me. This has kind of divided that neighborhood up a lot out there. I hope this thing that, I believe the applicant, Mr. Schieffer, is gonna do his best to follow these guidelines and, come back, when it comes back in January of every year, everything's good, and hopefully that flight path can, mitigate some of the noise and whatever, and flight times, and I hope that, it's quiet enough out there, because people, when they move to Ridgefield or Edina or, Egan, they expect jet noise, because they're out by an air, and so out here, it's, and I'm not far from there, and helicopters go over me. People didn't expect to move near, a heliport or an airport, so it's, I just hope that respect the neighbors, that's all I would say.
Well, and that's what I think we're all hoping for, is that a little harmony can be restored. I was happy to see it was a Bell and not a Robinson or some other tin can that makes an awful lot of noise. Again, I'm not an expert, but, so, yes, we're hoping the good neighbor takes over. So we have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion as amended?
Yes, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I guess I'm echoing Commissioner Wolf, but I want to bring up, the applicant talked, or his expert talked about how this is going to be one of the most restricted helipads in the country. And I guess that's just, I think worth noting to everyone involved, that that's happened because of everybody's involvement, because of the incorporation of comments and wishes from the neighbors and from people involved. And I understand very, very well that there are several other things they would have rather had in here. But in the end, it's one of those situations, and I think we've had several of these over the past few years, where probably everybody walks away a little bit unhappy because there's some middle in there. And then finally, to the applicant, I think, he's been engaged and involved in this process. To him and to the neighbors, I think we've been clear over the past several conditional use permits that if conditions are not met, we will look at this. This isn't something that's just a rubber stamp. It's putting conditions in that have to be adhered to in order to keep the conditional use permit. So that's, I think we're in that middle ground, and just want to thank everybody, I guess, for really engaging and making this something that has found that middle ground.
Totally agree with that. You know, the goal is to have everyone be able to exercise their property rights, you know, neighbors and the applicant himself. And so that, and there has been a lot of effort to try to accomplish that. I know not everyone is going to be happy with that. Looking at groups that are represented here, I get that. But we also don't want to say, you know, one person can't do something that he has a right to do. And so it's, yeah.
It's tough and it's wet here. Yep.
Exactly right. And no one's getting 100%. And not that it was about that, but it's trying to be fair and reasonable and trying to be good neighbors and try to see some harmony restored. And I guess we'll see. So with that, we have a motion, we have a second. Once again, is there any further discussion? Otherwise, looking online, because I know there's a little bit of a delay. Otherwise, Deb, take it away.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 7, committee reports and commissioner updates. You know, I typically start all the way to my right, so I'm going to look at Commissioner Barb Weckman-Brecky on screen, even though she's not in the normal spot. Try to keep our normal order just so we keep things flowing from a digital perspective.
All right, thank you very much. First off, before I go to my meetings, I want to say that I received a lot of calls in the last 2 weeks, but I'm going to just highlight a very nice one I received from a veteran who lives in Scott County named Gerald, thanking us so much for the support of the Veterans Service Office. And he recently moved back to Scott County and has been getting rides to the VA for medical appointments through our VA office in the van, and is just so happy and thankful for that. So just wanted to pass along that call. On October 23rd, I attended the AMC district meeting online, and also on October 23rd, participated in a meeting with a private corporation called Buchanor. They have facilities in Apple Valley, that's their U.S. corporate headquarters, also in Lakeville and in Hutchinson. And they are just working to inform elected officials about their business. We do have a good number of Scott County citizens who work for them, and it was just very interesting, and I thank them for reaching out. October 26th had the board meeting for Minnesota Alliance for Healthy Families, or Metropolitan Alliance for Healthy Families, excuse me, the 11 county cooperation for our home visiting program, looking at finances, looking at how our nurses have been able to reach these families during this COVID time and continue the services to them. Also on the 26th, the county administrator and I had a meeting with the mayor of Jordan and city administrator, just to discuss several common interests, especially regarding transportation and the 282-9 project and interchange. On October 27th, had a meeting with an employee, talked about some of our collection efforts in the state recovery and his ideas for things we could do differently or better. October 27th was our board workshop site visit. Also on October 27th, I participated in the housing group meeting. Finally, also on October 27th, had the Live, Learn, Earn educational prep meeting. October 28th, had a meeting for the Human Services Academy, or Human Services Industry Council for the academies, hearing about Shockley High School and their preparations for getting kids kind of into the real world this year, even though they're doing so much digitally. So good ideas were exchanged there. Also on the 28th, had a meeting with Jeff Hansen, the Executive Director of CAP. Later that day, on October 28th, I had a committee call for my NACO Human Services and Education Committee. One of the topics that was discussed was very interesting about how many more grandparents are raising kids and so many of the challenges around them. And from a federal level, looking at how sometimes those grandparents aren't eligible for the same type of benefits that might have happened if those kids were being raised by foster families or an out-of-home placement, yet we'd rather have the grandparents doing it. So just some thoughts about how to fill some of those gaps. And then on the 29th, again, participated in the second evening of that housing work group meeting. This is my report.
Thank you very much. Now, normally I go all the way down to my left, I'm gonna go to my right. Commissioner Beard.
Mr. Chair, on the 20th, we had a workshop here and where we talked about, as I mentioned earlier, among other things, the statewide health improvement plan and what the new 5-year agreement might mean for us. On the 21st, we had a Zoom meeting with Micah folks and with our attorney and with Claire Roebling to talk about the upcoming presentation to the Blue Ribbon Commission on the Met Council. On the 22nd, met with staff and with the Beacon Housing folks here about a capital contribution of $900,000 to help complete their financing for a proposed homeless shelter over at the KC Hall in Shakopee, at that site. On the 23rd, the AMC District 10 meeting, attended that with Commissioner Brecky and Administrator Vermillion. We're also on that Zoom meeting. On the 24th, the Up Honor virtual tour that was referenced, they, just so you know, they make PEX piping, and they do it in a plant in Lakeville and plant in Hutchinson. And so I was always happy to hear about cool stuff like that, but wondering why they were making us aware of it. But I think Commissioner Weckman-Brecky covered the purposes there. Let's see, at Met Council here. On the 26th, I did speak to the Met Council Blue Ribbon Commission, along with our attorney Ann Gehring, concerning our concerns about the makeup of the Met Council, with that there are no local elected officials at all. We're the only one of 402 metropolitan planning organizations in the United States that have no elected officials. Specifically, local elected officials are prohibited from serving on the Met Council. And so we were encouraging the Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission to consider a change to the way the governance board of the Met Council is made up. On the 26th also, let me back up to that presentation for just a moment. In our debriefing about that on the 29th, we just kind of did a debriefing on how we thought things went. While I was making my presentation on a Zoom screen, I could only see myself. I couldn't see the whole screen. The other people did. And they said, when you got to your ask, that you reform the way the Met Council's governing board is composed, and that you put local elected officials, and specifically that each county have one commissioner serve on it. I think one person said the look on their faces was like you'd just stolen their Halloween candy. So I don't know how far our request is going to get with that kind of a reaction. Again, I missed it because I couldn't see their faces, but others could, and they said it was pretty priceless. So where was I here? On the 26th, the Unified Transit Plan update, attended that meeting. On the 27th, we had a budget workshop here. Yes, 27th. We had a workshop here. The 29th, Scott County Transportation Committee had a meeting, a joint meeting with Mike Barnes and with our new South Region Director and Lisa, and we talked over the TABS process and how Scott County was shut out this year and so on and so forth. On the 29th also, the Blue Ribbon recap with the Halloween candy example was, I already talked about that. I also sat through a bit of the Live, Learn, Earn housing plan presentation on the 29th. But perhaps at a workshop sometime we should talk about that and where we think we're going or we're being asked to go. And then this morning before I came in, I voted in person at Shakopee Precinct 12. As chairman, there was no line. The the staff that volunteered to work there. I thank them all for their service. They were friendly, cheery, upbeat. I was number 207 to vote at 8:10 this morning, so that's my report.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to look to Commissioner Ulrich online.
All right. On the 20th, I had a meeting with Beacon on Prairie Point and then for the capital and the ongoing subsidy. I made it clear to Beacon folks that I believe that we need some investment related to homelessness, the different variety of types of homelessness within Scott County. But yet I was not sure yet if Prairie Point was the kind of investment we should make, but the category has my full attention, and I'm concerned about things like re-entry into the community from jail, or there's all kinds of different types of homelessness, so I'm concerned about each category and how we could approach each one. On the 21st, I attended TAB, and there was quite a discussion about Scott County not being funded in the solicitation, at least so far in the different scenarios. There's a possibility with Oprah programming dollars that we could get the $10 million for 169, 282, and 9 project in Jordan. And I think our thought is if we don't get the full $10 million, it might be better for us to not take any money this solicitation, because that project is about a $30 million project. So if we got 5 and we had to come up with 25 million, that would be very difficult, I'm sure. And even getting 10, it's still a difficult project to pool funding, because MnDOT has told us they don't have money to match or bring into most projects in the solicitation, and they certainly would not have money for ours, which would be the bottom of the projects, road projects in the solicitation. So again, if we don't get the full 10 million, we may step aside this time and remind them next time that we did step aside. They do have a chart that shows over from 2014 till now, even without getting money in this solicitation, that our funding level would be aligned with our population, that we've done well in the past. I don't think that's a very helpful graph. I mean, the more important point, I think, is that if any county has ever not gotten a project, it's extremely rare. I'm not positive that it's happened since I've been on the tab, which is 20 years. It's a big deal that we would not get money in the solicitation. 22nd, the Fish Board meeting. 23rd, meeting with Janet Williams and with MBTA, a couple leaders from MBTA. We talked about the red line and the Met Council ending the contract with MBTA to run this service, which has really become a local service, a station-to-station local service. It hasn't really functioned as a BRT for several years, so it feels like Met Council and Metro Transit is invading an opt-out service area and taking their service, and so we have concerns about that. We'll be expressing that in ongoing ways with the Met Council and with our legislators and so forth. We also talked about Met Council governance, and I pointed out how staff dominated the structure of the Met Council, and their accountability and allegiance to the governor has sometimes hurt Scott County. I have specific examples, and obviously put forward the case of having appointed, elected representation on the Met Council. I think, I don't know if this Blue Ribbon Commission is going to be sympathetic to us on that at all, but on the 27th, a very long day for me. We started early with the chair, vice chair, and then the county board workshop, then the helicopter test, and then the live, learn, housing plan, and then after that, the scale unified transit management plan. The 28th, the MBTA board meeting, and then we had the live, learn, earn housing plan. And there's one point I've been making about this housing blueprint that we will be seeing, is that I hope and expect that we'll have data-driven strategic recommendations on how we can respond to the variety of types of homelessness in Scott County. I would say without the data, we have no basis for saying yes or no to funding any given project that comes before us. So we need to know how many and what types of people are homeless in our county, and how can we potentially meet some of those needs. How can we allocate resources, then if we don't have the data, we don't have a reason to say yes or no. So I'm really pushing hard on data in that blueprint. 29th, the Transportation Committee meeting. 30th, and that was with Mike Barnes. We talked again how they don't have money to fund projects in the region, that they're stressed way beyond their means, more so than they have been stressed probably in recent long number of years. So they have a pretty bleak picture they're presenting to us. The 30th, the Greater MSP board meeting. They're developing a regional recovery barometer. They have a dashboard that they had in the past about our region, but this is going to be a barometer of how we're doing with recovery and where are there gaps and are we on track? Is there something we need to do with recovery? And they're also analyzing how to have an annual meeting this year. Obviously, it won't be in person, and they're trying to figure out what would be the Greater MSP story to tell in the region. And we have a lot to overcome with our region, with the negatives that have happened with racial tension and police brutality and defunding the police department and rioting and looting. All those are sort of black marks in the community. We have to figure out a way to respond to all those adequately and then tell a good story, a truthful story of how our region is a great place to come and do business. The 2nd of November, the Mobility Management Board meeting. That's it in my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking to my left, Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the 21st, the Insurance Committee met, and some good news. The amount of reserves is going up, partly because a lot of people are not opting to get some medical stuff, and that's a good thing because there's money up, whatever the months in a reserve. But that means people aren't going to the doctor, which could be a bad thing as time goes on. So the cure shouldn't be worse than the disease, kind of thing. So then on the 22nd, met with Beacon, with Commissioner Beard, and kind of along what Commissioner Ulrich said, you give the homeless thing, and one point I kind of made was just not to take people in, just, you guys just sit here until something happens, have some strings attached, something that these people get educated or get better and get a job and better their life and get off the system. A lot of this stuff is generational, where people just over and over again. So anyhow, so need more information on that. And then Vermilion River Joint Power that afternoon, kind of quiet there. Elko New Market had their twice monthly meeting that evening. Met with the administrator on the 26th, and then the WMO, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Then we had the board workshop, field trip, the CDA online with the housing, and then the MESB was on the 29th, talking a little bit about an outage with the 911 there. That was kind of a big deal. Oh, yeah. And then back to that WMO kind of thing, the Spring Lake, talked with the, just had a little short conversation with the town board chair there about the McMahon outlet, for which there was $600,000 in bonding for. And we're gonna have to come up with, from what I understand, $300,000, just matching dollars to get that thing rolling. And as I look at it, we almost should have had that $300,000 set up beforehand, so that, because we need to have this by January 4th or something. Maybe Commissioner Beard, you know more about the timeline on the dollars and that stuff, but I think we need that in place by January 4th, or they don't get the money. And we've been fighting for these dollars for a number of years, and that lake is going up, and there's no outlet, and so somehow or another we're going to have to get that fixed.
Well,
so,
with a bond, there's 5 years to accomplish the purposes that the bond is authorized.
oh, is it?
for.
Okay.
So we do have 5 years. Lord, I hope it didn't take that long.
But I thought they had said we had to have some of the money or something by the 4th of January of next year.
That could be. I was just
Okay.
reading a note here from bond counsel regarding another bond grant. And,
Okay.
They do require local matches and pre-design and all that,
Yep.
unless it's specifically exempted, so.
So, and we pumped last year, I don't know if it was 30 or 40,000 bucks, but if we were to spend 30 to 40,000 bucks a year,
Yeah,
10 years,
it's crazy.
we could have just paid for it. So anyhow, then there's that the road, County Road 8 and some of the Mushtown, whatever over there, that if we don't do something, that road may start to suffer. And there's septic tanks and trees and stuff that's already suffering. And then Prior Lake City last night had their workshop and city council meeting. Cedar Lake had their monthly meeting and had a short meeting with the Credit River board chair about some things coming up here on actually on the 16th. 2 weeks from yesterday, they're going to have an administrative law judge at the town hall. They're going to talk a little bit about the timeline of becoming a city and how that's going to work. And that is my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for my report on the 20th, the board workshop on SHIP, which we passed today. Also, I believe it was the 20th, it was my round with the Beacon Executive Director, and I was very candid as I've been with all the folks, and I'm not necessarily against the project. I am not super excited and happy about the tack that they've taken to get here, which I voiced that to her. So there's nothing to hide there. And happy to tell you more about that if there's more. But on the 22nd, Fish Board, 27th, Chair, Vice Chair, and then we followed that up with the budget workshop. And we had our sound check as well, our field trip. Later that evening was Housing Plan number 1 with the Live, Learn, Earn. 29th, as was mentioned, MESB, and that was a, you know, we meet on a regular basis, but this was with the, was it Lumen, the group that deals with the 911 and the outage that happened in, boy, it seems like forever ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And, you know, they got a lot of heat early on because obviously taking out 911, like, it still blows my mind how that happens. But, you know, some changing of some equipment and this drive mirrored that drive, and I still like, come on. So that was the intent of that call to, like, this cannot happen again. This is like a big deal. This isn't like some T1 into some 5 and dime. I mean, this is 911 across the country. So we'll see. Later that evening on the 29th, Housing Plan number 2. You know, we've always talked about wanting to have a more strategic, comprehensive housing plan. And these were good discussions. I'm just not sure that it was the broad spectrum. I know some of you guys were on there. It'd be interesting to get your opinions at some point, but it seemed like a subset of the housing plan, not the comprehensive, but that was just my take. On the 2nd, I missed the Prior Lake workshop. I was there at the city council. You know, they're changing some water rates and some things like that. Today's the 3rd, election day. I voted in person. I was really wanting to vote early, but that didn't work. There was lines this morning, but they went fairly quickly. I was 1:45. People are scrubbing, cleaning, spraying, masks all over the place, tape on the floor. Never questioned my safety at any time. So voting is open until I believe 8 today. So get out there and vote if you haven't voted already. For the millions that already have, good for you.
6 people who
Yeah,
have.
for the sick. Well, 4 now, 4 because it's almost, you know, it's almost 11. So get out there and vote. I think that is it for my report. I'm going to look online to Leslie, our county administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first update was just a little bit on voting as well. Cindy sent out a email this morning that we had 51,661 requests for absentee ballots, or 54.8% of our registered voters. 47.8% of those have actually turned back in and their ballots have been accepted, so about 45,000 of them. If people have a ballot they want to drop off, it needs to be dropped off today at one of those 7 locations by 3 o'clock. Mail-in votes close at 8 o'clock tonight, p.m. And then if people want to vote in person, if they don't get their mail-in ballot handed in, they of course can bring it and spoil it and then vote in person at their precinct up until 8 o'clock tonight, just as you mentioned earlier. So kudos to our staff. They have been working Saturdays. They have been working Sundays. They have, this is incredible, the percentage of absentee ballots that has come in compared to what we historically have seen. We have had some great part-time staff come in and work weekends and evenings to keep up and to keep this accurate, and just very, very proud of the staff and the cities of Prior Lake, Shakopee, Savage and Jordan also stepped up and allowed their voters to vote in person early at those locations. And I think that the voters of this county really, really appreciated being able to go to their city hall or instead of having to come into the county courthouse. So I think that was a real step in the right direction and pretty much the equivalent of all of our surrounding counties as well. So just a reminder that we are closed November 11th for Veterans Day. It is really hard to believe that that is next Wednesday, and we honor our veterans on that day. We have your work and planning session on November 20th, that Friday, so I'm hoping all of you have that on your calendars as we take a look at 2022. And then following the board meeting today, we have a work session. I think Scott and Ron are presenting on our emergency operations plan, which has to be updated. And then I'll be presenting on a CARES update and where we are with those funds. So a lot happening.
Hey, Leslie, one quick question, just with the mail-in voting. You know, people are nervous, or if they mailed something and they're not sure, they still can walk in today and vote. Is that, even if they've mailed something already, that the in-person will supersede anything that's coming in the mail? Is that a fair assessment?
Correct, yep, they will. Then the mail-in vote would not be, and Cindy's probably online, but yes, if that happens, they should be able to track. Of course, they can go online and see if it's already been accepted. But I believe if it doesn't look like it's gonna be accepted, they can come in and vote in person, and then the mail-in ballot would be spoiled or destroyed. Cindy, are you online?
I am. Thank you for the question. Yes, you're correct. So anything that's in flight, if they go to track my ballot on the Secretary of State's website and they see that it hasn't been accepted, some people thought that it said it has been voted. Accepted is the last indicator that we have it and it has gone through the tabulator or the scanning process. But anything that is not accepted up to this point, anybody can go in and they can vote at their local precinct. And anything that we get following that, we check with the precinct before we will cast any of the ballots that we receive today to make sure that none of these folks have gone in person and done their due diligence on getting out and voting. So
Well, and here's a
yeah,
follow-up.
we encourage heavily people to check. We have been receiving ballots back that have no signature envelope, which of course we have no idea who they are. So they just kind of go into like a file that we store with all of our other elections elections information. But those voters, whoever they are, they're going to be sitting out in limbo. So again, we highly encourage anybody who has a ballot to either drop it off at whatever, it's actually 8 locations, and or if they choose not to do that when they go vote in person, they can destroy that ballot and then go ahead and go in person. That's fine.
So I think you answered this, but and that's probably why I went in person, because I'm old school. But so if somebody is unsure whether they mailed it I shouldn't say a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 days ago, if they're unsure, or if they wanted to change their vote and it's already been received, they can go in. 2 questions I know. They can go in person today, and that act of going to vote in person supersedes anything that was mailed or not mailed, or if they wanted to change their. Okay.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
So if we have their ballot and it's been accepted,
Yep.
they're done.
Okay. Got it.
They can't go in and change their vote. There's no way, because those things have already been tabulated.
Got it.
That's what I
We
thought,
don't know
yeah.
whose ballot is whose. 14 days before this election, there is no way for a voter to retract
Okay.
any ballot that has been accepted.
That's the piece I was unclear of, so that's good. So 14 days. All right.
Yeah, that was my second question. Thank you for clarifying. Mr. Chair, my first question is Cindy. Canvassing board we set for the 13th, but now that we don't have to take ballots up to 7 days after Election Day, are we still meeting on the 13th, or are we going to be this Friday?
Well, there's a little bit of a.
I asked her that this morning.
The canvassing board is still a week from Friday.
It
and
is,
let me tell
okay.
you why. So the order that came down from the court
Yeah.
was on the presidential race. The
Only other
county
presidential.
and every local, or every, elections office is still required to segregate and count all ballots that are received in the next 7 days, through the 10th. Those ballots are gonna get uploaded to the Secretary of State's website, those results, excuse me, not ballots. And if the court decides, and I'm not entirely certain if they're gonna get counted unless the court decides otherwise, or if the court has to decide to allow them to be counted. Regardless, every day by 6 o'clock, we have to report to the Secretary of State on how many ballots we received in the mail that were postmarked on or before Election Day.
Okay.
We will go through the ballot board process, and we will go ahead and we will scan those results, or, excuse me, process those results, and we most likely will report them either once or maybe twice out of this next 7 days. So the decision was very specific to the presidential race and not to the rest of the race.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Cindy?
Yes.
But if somebody sees that they're not going to make it and they want their ballot to count with the presidential election, they need to get in and vote in person, and anything in the mail then would be spoiled, correct?
Correct. Well, yes, once they vote in person, yes, we would just think that the voter it's already voted, it would have been a spoiled ballot, correct. And anything, even our post office is really good at, if they get ballots after their initial drop-off, they dropped off this morning some express mail. They came and they dropped off the regular mail. And on election day, as they have done since at least my involvement in elections, they drop off multiple times during the day. And again, each of those ballots that come in, we go through and we start going through ballot board, but we do not open and count those votes until we have a validation that that voter did not go to the poll.
Good, thanks.
They sit there until that information is received by the county. If we know that they voted, we pull them, we spoil them. If they haven't, then we open those envelopes and we process.
Cindy, if I could ask a question here, and maybe you already answered it, but if somebody mailed their ballot in late, and they said to themselves, boy, I shouldn't have mailed that in, I don't know if that's really gonna get there in time. And then they say, well, I'm gonna go vote in person. Are they potentially in trouble for voting twice?
No, because their ballot was not received, unless it was accepted by the county, it is not a vote. Even if we get ballots in all the time that people have gone to the in-person voting because they don't see their votes accepted, and then their ballot comes after the fact because it was stuck in la-la land. We just spoil the ballot. We just said the voter already voted. It's not an attempt to vote twice. They just didn't know which one. They wanted to make sure that their vote counted. So if they don't see that their accepted vote by today, they usually go to the polls and they vote today before 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's why it's so important that we have a valid signature on the envelope that's being mailed in, so we know who to credit the vote to.
Correct.
Not how they voted, just that they voted.
50 to 75 envelopes with just the manila or the goldenrod envelope with the ballot in it.
Oh, boy.
It's sad because it's like those people said, well, I know that I mailed it. Yeah, well, you forgot a good portion of it for us to be able to validate that your identity and validate that you signed it and all the things, all the check boxes are checked. So it just sits there. So hopefully those voters are checking the website, and if they don't see that their voter record was marked as their ballot being accepted, that they go in and vote.
Okay.
In person to their polling location.
I can't speak to other counties, other states, just because we're closest to this one, but I feel confident in our group and our voting.
We got the best.
So thanks for that, because I don't, I'm just saying not close to the other ones, so. So thanks for all the good work. I know you guys have been hard at it. I've seen a lot of hanging chads.
We hired a bunch of temps we're a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs down here anyway, but, they truly have brought us a ton of value, and they've worked so hard, and, they're here today working just as hard. And I will tell you that we are in such a good spot today, much better than I thought that we would ever be. And it is really because of what they have done and the dedication that they have to making sure that Scott County elections is held with the most upright integrity, and that these results are accurate. So kudos to them.
Yep.
I think that we can applaud our people who have come in here and said, you know, we want to make a difference, and they certainly have.
Cindy, one more question. I've heard in some other states that they're not actually going to even start counting the absentee ballots till tomorrow. What do you think of that? I mean,
well, you know, it depends upon, some of their rulings too, and I am not entirely certain. Some of these ballots are called provisional ballots. There are states that have those, and they're really not their absentee, but they're more any ballot that comes in from a non-registered voter that can't be validated through multiple venues that we have to do, through the state, DBS, or through the courts, or through the Social Security Administration, whichever way we have to do to validate the identity of that person. Those types of ballots are held until proof of identity and validation can occur. Those are provisional, not absentee. So if there are states that have really just flat out early voting, and they tabulate those votes all the time, they don't have this envelope process. So I don't know if I can talk smartly about particularly absentee votes not being counted right away until after, but I know provisional ballots are held. And those are a little bit different. We don't have provisional balloting in the state of Minnesota at this time.
We tried to put a provisional balloting policy in place in the legislature, and my goodness, what a firefight that was. You thought we were trying to take away people's right to vote, but all we wanted was a provisional status for ballots that, like, people that walk up and say, yeah, I live here, and nobody knows who they are. Those ballots go right in the machine and get counted with yours and mine. And they get a follow-up postcard after the fact. And there's deep concerns about that. But once Cindy has control of the ballots, there's absolutely no question of the integrity of the process.
That's a good caveat. All right, well, thank you very much. Gonna look down to my right, Mr. County Attorney. Anything new?
We do not need to recess.
Thank you very much. Following the meeting, I think Leslie did mention this, but we will be meeting in a workshop to receive information on CARES Act funding, our Scott County Emergency Operations Plan, and our Scott County Hazards Mitigation Plan. So with that.
Motion to adjourn.
Chair,
Well, yep,
one more announcement.
yep.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say this during my report, but I did get a call late last week from Jim Peterson at the Renaissance Festival. Informed me that they have renewed their lease at their current site for 2 more years. So their plans are to be on their current site for 2021 and 2022. And so I just wanted to make sure I reported that. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's good. It's good tidbit to have. Good. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on adjournment? Otherwise, we'll look to Deb.
Commissioner Reckman-Brecky. Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
aye.
We are adjourned.
Okay. I'll
Couple
sleep that
minutes
up.
and then fire.